Hey guys, it's been a while since I've been able to do these videos, so let's go ahead and just start off. We did the first 3 units and now we're on Unit 4. Unit 4, Legislative Branch. A lot of information, but honestly, there's only so much you need to know. Alright, first of all, the primary focus of the legislative branch is to create law, to pass laws. Specifically federal laws, laws that every state has to follow, laws that every citizen in this country has to follow. It pretty much just takes care of everything revolving around government, federal government specifically. So, legislative branch, 2 House Congress. You have the House of Representatives, and then you have the U.S. Senate. Qualifications, really it's not that big of a deal to remember. But to be in the House, you have to be 25. You have to be a U.S. citizen. Does not have to be native born like the president, but just a U.S. citizen so you can be naturalized and actually serve in Congress. So you have to also live here at least 7 years as a citizen. Then there's a residency requirement for living in the district of the state that you represent. For the U.S. Senate, you have to be at least 30. You have to be a U.S. citizen, lived here at least 9 years, and then live in the state that you represent. Alright, but don't really stress about the qualifications. It's just not that big of a deal. The other things about Congress is that in the House, there's 435 members of the House. It's broken up by districts amongst all the 50 states. We determine this by the census every 10 years. So a state could lose representation or a state can gain representation. So it's every 10 years that would take place. That's reapportionment. Alright, what we don't want is gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is when a district is drawn to only benefit a specific voting group. So it would only really benefit a specific political party. That's illegal. It's unconstitutional, and sometimes it does come up in the court system, and the courts have consistently said you cannot gerrymander to only benefit a specific group. So 435 people in the House, they serve 2-year terms, unlimited re-elected terms. So as long as they have a pulse, as long as they're breathing, as long as the voters are happy with them, then simply they just get re-elected. In the Senate, you serve 6-year terms, and you are going to have unlimited, once again, representation. As long as you get re-elected every 6 years, you get to serve that position in the state. And there are 2 from each state, so there's 100 senators. And just to let you know, once again, using the notes, which I shared with you on the class webpage on Edmodo, and then of course, I gave you access, or I told you how to get access to the information about the units, and this comes from the Pitt County Schools website. So let's keep moving on really quick. There's a lot of things that just is too much information for us about this unit. But certainly you want to understand the fact that they have certain privileges. These are people who get low-cost life insurance, low-cost medical benefits as far as going to the doctor, as far as having insurance. They have something called a franking privilege, which means that they can send things through the Postal Service, which is a government corporation, at no cost. They just simply sign their name on the actual document, and it goes through the Postal Service for free, and it must be job-related. They also have some legal immunity, which means that for simple things such as misdemeanors, traffic violations, as long as they're working, they don't have to deal with that issue. Now, if it was a serious circumstance, a felony charge, legal immunity does not help them in that circumstance. There's leadership. These people are appointed or actually elected through their specific branch of Congress to serve as a leader of that branch of Congress. So for instance, in the House of Representatives, you have the Speaker of the House. The current Speaker is Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan basically decides what pieces of legislation will be sent to which committee, and also which pieces of legislation are more important to be discussed in open floor debate. Beyond that, you have the Majority Leader, you have the Majority Whip, the Minority Leader, and the Minority Whip. Their job is to basically represent their political party. Right now, the Republicans control the House and the Senate. That means there's more Republicans in the House and more Republicans serving in the Senate than there are Democrats. And excuse me, I'm talking really fast this early in the morning, and not really doing well with my voice, so hopefully it will hold up for the rest of this video. But getting back to the leadership, the purpose of the leadership is basically to vote for or against pieces of legislation that basically have political motivation. If a Republican supports a bill in the House and the Democrats don't like it, then the minority leadership is going to get all the Democrats to vote against it, and vice versa. If you have a Democratic-sponsored bill, then the majority leadership is going to do everything they can to not actually vote for or support that bill. So in the Senate, the leadership is a little bit different. You have the President of the Senate, which is by Constitution the Vice President, but the Vice President really is not going to be there. Their job is become more involved. They have more things to do. So there's a person who is elected, the President pro tempore, who serves when the VP is not available. Excuse me once again. That person really is just a ceremonial position. The true power of the Senate is the majority leader. Remember, the Republicans control the Senate right now. So you have the majority leader, majority whip, minority leader, minority whip. Don't get too caught up in who's in what position or which party controls the House, what controls the Senate. It's not something that you're going to really see on a test. It's not something you're going to see on a final exam. So, you might need to know that there are three types of committees. There are standing committees, which are permanent committees. Their job is to deal with the day-to-day affairs of what's going on in government, what's going on in society. You then have what are called select/special committees, and they only are going to work or deal with legislation as it comes up, as the circumstance evolves. And then you have what is called a joint committee. A joint committee is a committee made up of members of the House and Senate, and it's just a quicker way to get a bill passed, especially if a bill is going through the House and the Senate at the same time, same bill, but then when it gets through the House and the Senate simultaneously, it's been changed in some form or fashion. You go to a joint committee to quickly iron out all the details, make some compromises, and then quickly send it to be voted for in the House and the Senate floor, and then hopefully the President will sign it as well. As far as who serves on these committees, it's based on a seniority system. It's also based on the fact of who is in the majority control of the House and the Senate. So for instance, you're going to have more Republicans on committees than you're going to see Democrats on committees because they have majority control. The person who has served the longest in the House and the Senate typically gets first choice of which committees they want to serve on. You're going to serve on multiple committees if you're elected to Congress because there are a lot of committees that deal with a lot of different issues in our government and society. Now, as far as the types of powers that Congress has two types of powers. Expressed, things that we find directly in the Constitution, such as the power to declare war. That's expressed, it's in the Constitution. And then we have something called implied powers. Implied powers come from a specific part of the Constitution, Article 1, called the Necessary and Proper Clause. These are powers that Congress can create for itself as society changes. So Congress oversees, they basically monitor, regulate the planes in the air. They work with the FAA. And the ability for Congress to do that, well, that's not something that was expressly written in the Constitution, so that means that, well, Congress has the ability to create that power. These are called implied powers. It's also sometimes called the elastic clause, as well as the necessary and proper clause. Congress also has powers that have nothing to do with making laws. All right. For instance, they can propose amendments. There's a two-step process of proposing amendments. You have a 2/3 proposal by Congress, both houses of Congress. If you can get 2/3 of the membership of Congress to vote for and propose and approve an amendment, then it goes to the second step, which is the states to ratify it. Congress also can approve or reject presidential nominees. Specifically, the Senate does this. So if the president appoints a new member of the federal court system, a federal judge, the Senate has to approve that. If the president appoints a new cabinet member, the Senate has to approve that as well. They also have the ability to impeach elected officials. This is also a two-step process. You have a circumstance where you have the House basically accusing the person, the elected official, of doing something wrong, and then the Senate holds a trial and then decides the fate of that elected official. So, for instance, with the president, we've only had two presidents to be officially impeached. You had Andrew Johnson. This is after the Civil War. He basically, by one vote, gets to keep his job. Then you have Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton is going to be impeached because he lies while under oath. That's perjury. He gets to keep his job as well. So there's never been a president who's ever been kicked out of office. But Congress has the ability to actually impeach. There are some limitations of Congress. Congress cannot actually create three types of laws. Number one, they cannot pass ex post facto laws. Ex post facto laws is basically punishing someone for something that was not illegal at the time in which the act was committed. Ex post facto means after the fact. They cannot pass bills of attainder. Bills of attainder is basically punishing someone without a jury trial. And they cannot suspend writs of habeas corpus, which means that if you are locked away and you're not told why you're being locked away in prison, without going to a judge, without being in a courtroom, that would be a suspension of your writs of habeas corpus. Congress cannot do that. Only the president can do it, but only in times of crisis. So an example would be the Japanese American citizens that were put in internment camps. The president did that during World War II because he considered that a crisis situation, and he felt like it was a national security issue. So only the president can do that, not Congress. So, what does Congress really do then, as far as like their primary function? Passing laws. So let's quickly talk about how a bill becomes law. Now, we can very easily watch the Schoolhouse Rock episode of I'm Just a Bill. And in class, you saw that. Excuse me one more time. Sorry. Remember, this is not the bells and whistles. This is not a Hollywood production. This is just me and a camera in my home. So, back to the subject. How does a bill become a law? Well, there has to be an idea. Someone has to propose an idea for a federal law, something that's important, such as building a new hydroelectric dam, or increasing funding for national defense, or passing a law dealing with immigration, or passing a resolution for a declaration of war. So it has to be something important, something that's really important to society. So we have an idea. That idea is written down on paper. You have to basically cover all the aspects of the idea. The who, what, when, where, why, and how. And of course, how they're going to pay for it, of course. That's the most important thing. It then gets sent to a committee. So if it starts in the House, it goes to the entire House as far as the process, then goes through the same process in the Senate. So it goes to committee, the committee looks at it, it goes to a subcommittee to be reviewed, the committee then reports on it. If the committee says that they like the idea, it goes to the House floor for debate. There are limits in the House. In other words, you can't just talk and talk and talk because there's 435 members. They put time limits on how much a specific House member can speak on this bill. Then they vote on it. They can do a voice vote. They can do a standing vote. Most of the time they do an electronic vote. Once it's been approved, it then moves on to the Senate. The Senate then assigns it a number. It goes to the committee. It's studied. It's discussed. If it's sent then to the Senate floor, the senators then debate it just like they do in the House with one exception. It's called a filibuster. A filibuster is when a senator talks and talks and talks. They must remain standing. They cannot leave the Senate chamber. And as long as they control the floor, they're the ones doing the talking, nothing can happen to the bill. The purpose of a filibuster is to delay a vote, possibly because they think that the bill is going to be killed by the rest of the Senate. They don't think it's going to be approved. Or maybe they think that it will be approved and they don't like the idea of this new law. The only way to end a filibuster is a cloture vote. 3/5 of the senators have to vote to end the filibuster. Let's say that there's no filibuster, the Senate floor approves it, it then gets sent to the president. The president at that point can do one of three things. He can sign it, it then officially becomes law. He can veto it, that bill just died. It went through the entire process and the president said no. If the president says no with a veto, Congress can override that veto. It's called legislative override. But it takes a large number of congressmen to vote to override a presidential veto, so it doesn't happen that often. The president can also do something called a pocket veto. A pocket veto is when the president basically does nothing to the actual piece of legislation, the bill. He leaves it on his desk. He has 10 days to do something. If he doesn't do anything, he doesn't sign it, he doesn't veto it, then it either dies or becomes law without him being directly involved. In other words, he can have what is called sort of hands-off approach. It's not his fault if the bill doesn't work. If Congress is in session, after 10 days, if the president does nothing to the bill, it automatically becomes law. If Congress is out of session, they're not working, they've gone off on vacation, say for the Christmas holidays, then the bill dies. In other words, the president can just say it's not my fault. The pocket veto is just a way for the president to not actually do something with the bill. And as far as a session of Congress, it's a 2-year session. There's 2 actual sessions, 2 terms, or 2-year terms, excuse me. And each session lasts from roughly January to about late November, unless there's a crisis situation and Congress has to be called back, such as the resolution for a declaration of war when Pearl Harbor was attacked by the Japanese. That happened in early December. Congress had pretty much gone home. So, as far as Unit 4 is concerned, the big thing is understanding what Congress does. They make laws. The basic structure of Congress is a 2-house legislature, bicameral, and the fact that Congress has a specific process to make laws. So, this process is very difficult, it's very lengthy, because we want to make sure that good laws get passed. So, Unit 4 in a nutshell is all about legislative branch, Congress, Article 1. So Unit 5 coming up next, we'll be talking about the executive branch. Until then, see you later.